For Russia and Japan, and how they would be doing as of right now. Russia had by far the most options, solely because they would have so much they could have done, but you guys voted to have them invade Ukraine with 20% of the votes. Not a ton, I guess, but still the most voted option. This invasion could go one of two ways. Either A, they entered the country widely across the border due to the Ukrainian forces fighting in the west against Poland, or B, the Russians would gain a little bit of ground, but then their offensive would collapse. I actually believe the second option to be the most plausible. First up, the Russians would have been supporting anarchist rebels in the east of Ukraine for over a decade at this point. So upon the outbreak of this invasion, they would pass pretty quickly there and seize eastern Ukraine against the Azov Sea. Some other border territories would fall as well, but this would be about as Russia could do. You see, due to the nature of Russia's nation, they wouldn't have a professional military and militias city that would make it during wartime, while cities like Moscow and Volgograd would have something strong, possibly including some more tanks. I doubt that the entire Russian army would function very well, due to how decentralized it would be, and also it wouldn't have a unified chain of command structure. While this attack would be impressive on paper, I wouldn't be surprised if the Russians would start to lose ground after the first 2 or 3 months. However, with this attack, Poland would also begin to make headway to the west, so it's possible that Ukraine won't sign peace deal with either of these two nations as to drop out of the war. I suspect that it would be Poland, as the Poles would be willing to take a lot less than Russia would want, and also Poland needed to fight west against Germany. So Ukraine would drop out of the war with Poland, suffering only minor territorial losses, instead going to fight against the Russians in a separate war. Now let us look at Japan. 41% of you guys voted to have them still invade China like in our history. This is fine, we would have them invade about the same time as historically, 1937, only 1 year before the Second World War would break out. Now, how Japan does here is hard to say. On one hand, they would be stronger than in our history, having much more valuable resources and territories under their direct control, so I think that they should be able to do a little bit better. On the other hand, they would have to occupy said territories. Not only that, but China would be a little bit more united due to the lack of a Soviet Union, and hence Communist China receiving aid. With both of these facts mixed in, I'm going to say that in 1939 the Japanese advances would be our history, except for a very few minor extra gains. While we don't stop it, let's talk about America. 36% of you wanted the USA to remain fully neutral, not sending any aid to France or Britain. This would be a little bit difficult to justify, but luckily for us, we had the Great Depression start a little bit later, and it only really impacted America, so we can pin it on that. Do you have a better explanation for it? Feel free to let me know in the comments below. While you're down there, why don't you like and subscribe to the channel? It really helps me out a lot to make more videos like this. We're trying to reach 100,000 subscribers, and we're dangerously close. Without being said, back to the video. Now that's the opening months of the war covered. As the year switches over to 1939, Germany would be maintaining their momentum to the east, likely capturing Warsaw at this point. Hungary would also be in a really bad position, fighting on basically every front, and Germany advancing into Poland to their north. I could see their forces to start to collapse, as the Romanian entry would really screw them over. I think that Hungary would be the first nation in Poland's sphere to capitulate, and as such it would get reorganized. Slovakia would be given independence under communism. Romania would annex Transylvania and potentially some extra territories up to the Tisa River, and Serbia would annex the Hungarian south. The rest of Hungary would establish as a Hungarian Soviet Republic to switch sides. With this collapse of Poland's ally, they're likely cornered. Austrian and Serbian troops would finally be moved to other fronts, stopping the Italian advancements there. With Poland getting pushed more and more into their minority countryside, I doubt that they would be able to hold it down. With the capture of Warsaw, Germany would proclaim a rival government, the Polish Socialist Republic, and annex a handful of border territories. Looking at your votes, 20% of you also said that Russia would get involved against Poland at this point, which would have happened. The Russians would quickly seize land in Belarus and the Baltics, but most likely lose a little bit of land to Finland, as much of the Finnish army isn't fighting anywhere else. Soon after, Poland would surrender, but their army would keep fighting in Estonia. Poland would again be reorganized, with other minorities getting split off and forming their own socialist states backed by Germany. The Belarus area would be given to Germany, elongating their front line against Ukraine. This new offensive would free up a lot of German troops, as they don't need too many to man the front or occupy this territory. More troops would thus amass on the French border, which would see some bolder and bolder French actions, gaining more land quickly. At this point, I think that Finland's secondary strategy would be implemented. You guys voted for them to drop out of the war, and with the Polish surrender, I can see this happening. So, as of right now, we will only be fighting Russia, which would be a bigger threat than Germany. Germany's only demands to Finland would be to allow Leningrad to exist as an independent state, and not impede during their war against the French and Italians. The Finns would accept this and drop out of the war against Germany. Estonia would then follow, attempting to secure peace. Germany demanded they would cede all Latvian territories to the Latvian Socialist Republic and accept the socialist government. Estonia would refuse this at the start, but once the whole freedom would occur, they would be forced to accept. They would also likely cede much of their eastern territories to Russia, further expanding them. In less than a year, Germany and their allies would have secured all of Eastern Europe. Let's go check up on Ukraine. Their only focus as of right now would be holding off against the Russians, which I think would be doing pretty well for them. The extension of this front to their north would be an issue, but I doubt that Russia's disorganized army would manage to take too much advantage of this. The war would be framed as one of national survival rather than conquest, and the populace would rally behind the Ukrainian state. I do, however, see Romania demanding that they leave Bessarabia, as they would claim this part of Ukraine. The Ukrainians would have to accept this due to their current situation.
This is a and now
war, as they would basically have everything they would want, sending requests to the Polish and Hungarian governments in exile that they would help their liberation if they acknowledge their claims in Hungary. Both of them would likely refuse, so Romania would remain a de facto German ally that wouldn't be at war with France just yet. Speaking of the French, how is that front going? Well, about the same. You guys voted for France to continue their offensives against Germany, but with more German forces going west, I don't think that the French would gain too much as of now. So it doesn't look too good for the Italo-French alliance, but there is one front that would be going their way, the Balkans. Even with Hungary dealt with, Serbian forces are largely fighting among a larger front. Austro-Bohemian forces would come to help, but this would take a lot of time. The Greco-Serbian joint offensive you guys voted in the second round wouldn't gain too much ground, solely due to how stretched out they would be. They also would lack the element of surprise. You guys then voted on a large attack into Serbia by Italy, Albania and Bulgaria, which would be devastating for the Serbian nation. We can see sweeping gains in this counter-offensive, taking Belgrade and other important cities. This would be enough to have some comfort to negotiate, hoping to preserve itself. Germany would be having any of this and order the seizing of their leadership, effectively orchestrating a coup in Serbia. Austria-Bohemia would be allowed to annex Slovenia, the Austrian puppet in Hungary would annex their old territories from Serbia, and the rest would become a German client state. We can see the Italians and their allies to gain a little bit more of territory during this coup, but they would be eventually stopped in their tracks. Now let us go a little bit further south and take a look at Greece. Earlier I mentioned that they would launch another offensive, which would take some minor territories from Bulgaria and Albania, but overall not be that successful. With Serbia now gone, Greece would send a message to their neighbors, asking to sign a peace treaty. I could see this to go either way. Either Greece would manage to secure the very few small gains that they would drop out of the war, or the Italo-French alliance would refuse, forcing Greece to continue the fight. Since I think that these two options would have about the same likeliness, I shall flip a coin. Alright, heads is peace, tails is war.
Kurkkukipua. Luota Strepsilsiin. Se lievittää todistetusti kurkkukipua. Sen 2 antiseptistä ainesosaa tappavat bakteerit ja sairauksia. Strepsils. On every moment.
Olisiko korkea aika vaihtaa tämä velho kiinnostavaan äänikirjaan? Kokeile BookBeatia 30 päivää maksuttaa.
Sorry Greece, you're not out of the woods just yet. Following the quick advance against Serbia, Bulgaria and Albania would want to close this front to their south. I can see another strong counterattack take place here, which would be rather hard to conduct due to the Greek partisans in their own country. A large battle take place to capture Thessaloniki, but as it slows down due to city warfare, the offensive would stall, effectively undoing all of Greece's gains. Let's zoom out and take a look at some more neutral countries. The main factor that could effectively end the war for either side would be Britain, and you guys voted by a difference of literally 13 votes to have Britain announce that it would remain fully neutral, effectively stating that they wouldn't intervene with the war unless they would be provoked. Literally, if 13 people had voted differently, Britain would join the war and likely turn the tides. Thus your votes do matter and they can change everything. This also means that Belgium is now left unprotected. We'll get back to this a little bit later. Turkey would also be remaining neutral, with 36.3% of the votes having been focused on their economy. Another nation that would be following in Britain's footsteps would be America, with 34.5% agreeing to have them fully neutral as well, not sending any military aid. As such, France wouldn't be in a good situation. Not only is their aid limited, but also without the British blockade against Germany, the Germans can continue to trade through the North Sea, meaning that they wouldn't be suffering another starvation right during the Great War. Now Japan is an interesting case. As of now, Japan is invading China, and after some initial difficulties would be doing a lot better due to their stronger starting position, and China overall being weaker due to the lack of funds from Germany. Does this mean that China will surrender to Japan at this point? No, but it would mean that Japan will take much more of China, possibly securing the entire coastline. By this time in Europe, Serbia would have just capitulated, so Germany would be wanting to find a way to win. It's not impossible to see that Germany would offer Japan French into China in exchange for their entry into the war. This would be heavily debated within the Japanese High Command. On one hand, they could seize a ton of resources and link up with a potential ally in Siam, as well as expand their front with China, but on the other hand, they would also have to fight France. What I can see happening is that Japan will demand France to turn over into China, or else they will face war. With Indochina being the only large French base in Asia, and the French not really being able to fight the war so far away, they would be forced to accept this deal, but they would negotiate a favorable trade deal with Japan, making sure that France would still get plenty of resources they would need us to fight Germany. A partial victory for the Germans, but it's still a little bit helpful. The last nation I had you guys vote for would be Spain, and due to you guys having the anarchist win, this vote is now invalid. But looking at the actual situation the Spanish would be in, it wouldn't be a good one. With the anarchist victory, effectively all of Spain would be under Catalonian rule. You can see the Basques to break away and to form their own state, while Britain would expand Gibraltar due to the growing concerns for the base itself. Portugal might also expand into Galicia. Some research done like it's basically wanted the same thing that we would have going on in Russia right now. I do believe that Spain has started more successful attempt to establish a national identity and did many of the destructive reforms that the Black Army wanted. So as such, they would have a national army that would always be ready, not all the time to needed. Don't get me wrong, Spain would still suck, but it would suck less than this Russia. That was one heck of a detour. Let's go back to Europe. Now where were we? Right, Russo-Ukrainian war, stalemate on the Western Front, and the deteriorating Balkan Front. Germany would be needing another large win. Sure, the East is under their direct control, but now they're going against the fully mobilized France and their Balkan allies, and currently the war will be fought on their home territory. But with Britain now announcing their plans to remain fully neutral from now on, and the French getting less and less military supply from overseas, Germany knows what they must do, and this is when they the Benelux. And having a hard time deciding how much they would commit to this invasion. They would for sure invade Belgium and Luxembourg, but they would invade the Netherlands as well. On one hand, they don't really need them to go around the French defenses, but on the other hand, they would be a lot less reliant on them trade. Not only that, but the Schlieffen of this time war failed miserably. The Netherlands. However, I think that a secret third option is possible. And this would be the Dutch joining the war again on the side of Germany. Let me explain.
What the hell?
That is very popular in the years leading up to the Second World War. It campaigned against the Fascist Party, which was formed in 1931, which gained them most of their influence. While similar parties like is still established, I don't think that this would be their main point of campaigning due to the lack of political power. Whilst they were Germany recovering skyrocket. While this doesn't mean a communist or a socialist takeover of the nation, it means that the party would have a vast majority of the seats, and therefore the decision-making power. With Germany now looking west and their victory seemingly assured, we could see the Netherlands to join the international war and help invade the rest of the Benelux, being promised portions of Belgium and northern France. This advance would have caught the French off guard. Sure, they would have been anticipating an attack through Belgium by Germany, but they hadn't predicted that the Netherlands would invade as well. Belgium and Luxembourg would thus have fallen quickly, as France would fail to scramble forces out of Germany. By the end of this offensive,
I
this
just
structure
said they
would
would
die.
be trouble.
France would get out of the war. Today it seemed like just a repeat of the Great War, which means that nothing would be happening. With the not falling to the socialists, these protests would grow even wilder. Funny Länder could see the right followed even more by the people, instead of the left like in our history, as the left in France would have been seen as the enemy. So the sentiments of the war become a lot less popular the longer it goes, despite their victory in the Balkans. Now let us look at the two final votes. I thought you guys did. These were Carnitors for surrender. The first one was very simple, it was the losing side fighting to the death. Germany followed history, 58% voted yes. The next question was if it takes a forceful government change to take him out of the war, like the Russians during the Great War. 70% of you guys voted yes as well. Keep that in mind as we discuss the rest of the war. Let's cover all the fronts again. First of the East. Russia is fighting against both Finland and Ukraine, and is promptly losing against both. Finland would likely lose angels, while Ukraine would begin their counterattack and start taking their territory to deal with the start of the conflict. Russia would have to bite the bullet on one of these, and would much rather secure gains in the Black Sea than against Finland. So peace would be signed between the two for now, and we will cover that in the later video. As for the war against Ukraine itself, I doubt that the dispute with Finland would result in any changes. Ukraine is just strong enough to hold on against a large rabble of troops that would have outdated weapons, tactics, and little to no training. Russia would eventually have to sign peace with them as well, which would explore later as well. Now going down to the Balkans, Greece would continue to lose more and more ground to the Albanians. It will do pressure from Turkey to return their Anatolian territories, faced with mounting pressure from all sides and no allies nearby, would likely surrender, possibly after a coup. With the Greeks and Serbians having surrendered, Albania and Bulgaria don't virtually have any reason to fight. They would have been trapped when they were invaded, and the people that got invaded them were now defeated. The Vocals didn't really want to fight a prolonged war against Germany and Austria, so I don't find it was impossible for these two countries to come and offer a negotiated peace with the International, which would likely heavily favor them. Germany know this situation was unstable, and with the possibility of closing out the Balkan front, or at least removing the bulk of the enemy forces there, this would be very helpful for them as well. They would likely accept these conditions, and an armistice would be signed between the two for now. Italy wouldn't like this, and they needed Albania to remain in the war, and they can see this as the chance to take moral control over the nation. This would could to happen, ousting the Albanian king and replacing him with an Italian noble, announcing his loyalty to Italy and desire to stay in the war. Albania would effectively become a protectorate, and Bulgaria would protest this move heavily, announcing that this was illegal. Austria would use this chaos to attempt to make a little bit more progress in Bosnia, but this wouldn't be anything meaningful. The coup of an Italian ally would be yet another sting against the government, and many would say that it was uncalled for. Looking at the war, it's not just France and Italy against Germany and their allies, but they would remain firm and state that they would not surrender to the socialists for another war. By now, the year is likely around 1942, and the war had been going on for nearly 4 years, effectively during the Great War. The people of each country were tired and didn't want to fight any longer. As the Germans continued to make slow progress against the now mutinous French army, we can see a coup in Paris to happen, possibly a Paris commune. This commune militaristic elements of the government, securing absolute control. In Italy, the North would be in an open revolt, desiring a socialist government. Socialism was vastly popular in our history. In Rome, the protest filled the city, and the king would likely be forced to abdicate, being replaced with a temporary council that would run the nation. The Albanians would also oust their Italian king and likely reinstate Esat Toptani. With France and Italy's pro-war governments now effectively being thrown out of the window, the two countries would come forward, willing to negotiate. For the next episode of the series, you guys would get to vote on the peace treaty for this alternate Second World